All right. Good afternoon. Welcome to the second event for the Eileen Lappin Weiser Center for the Learning Sciences inaugural year. My name's John Wargo. I'm one of the steering committee members and an associate professor here in educational studies. I'm very excited to sit alongside my colleague, Dr. Natalie Davis, to welcome you all here for Curiosity and Learning, Putting Wonder to Work. So for those of you who don't know, the center was established from a generous gift from Eileen Lappin Weiser and Professor Leslie Herrenkohl. Leslie, if you can just wave your hand for us, was named its inaugural director in November of 2023. Beginning in January of 2024, Leslie assembled a steering committee of faculty in the learning sciences, of which Natalie and I are a part of, to develop guiding principles, missions, and goals for the center. Rounding out our team this summer, we were very lucky to also bring on Heidi Bennett. Heidi in the back, who so brilliantly facilitates all things for us, hello, joined as the center's program director. So many thanks to you, Heidi, for your leadership and guidance. Over the last winter and spring, we've worked really hard to collaboratively develop a mission, vision, and set of values that you see here. So the center's mission recognizes that human beings have an innate capacity for learning throughout our lives. Humans actively learn from each other and the world around us. In our view, learning happens across time and in many different places and is exciting, engaging, and filled with wonder and curiosity, as we'll see today, or at least we hope it can be. Yet we acknowledge the histories of injustice and the inequitable systems that limit opportunities for learning. And our values and visions seek to acknowledge and address these injustices as we, as both a center and as a larger sort of continuum of folks, act collectively, envision, and enact new policies. So some examples of the work we might imagine taking place under the auspices of the center include community-engaged research, the co-design of practices, tools, and technologies with communities, schools, and families, and learning opportunities such as practice-based or research opportunities for students here in the Marsal Family School of Education. Like the event today, we also experiences for public audiences to learn more about human learning and to critically engage with claims made about the role of emerging technologies in the learning sciences. And finally, we recognize the interconnectedness of learning and thriving for human beings in the natural world and seek to enact practices that embody justice and sustainability. So using the center as a host, an incubator for fostering new ideas and collaborations between scholars, practitioners, and community members, we currently have 4 seed projects under development. These projects, each in their own way, advance new scholarship, tools, and practices, as well as extend and expand how we conceptualize learning. Projects are led by various members of the faculty steering committee, and they are, of course, in various stages of development and ideation. If you're interested, you can read more about them on our website or talk to any one of us on the steering committee for more details. So our guiding theme for this year is curiosity. And through different events and activities, we'll explore the role that curiosity plays in people's learning, research, teaching, and practice. On October 16th, we launched the center with a reception and a keynote by Dr. Carol Lee. And today we welcome colleagues, Professors Kishonna L from the School of Information and Dr. Matthew Solomon from the Department of Film, Television, and Media to share how curiosity is reflected in their research and teaching practices. During the winter, we're planning listening sessions and an open house for faculty, staff, and students and community members, and another curiosity-themed event in February. In spring, we'll complete our first year with 2 engaged learning events, including the Spark Festival of Learning, led by Dr. Natalie Davis, and the Learning Levers competition administered by CEDAR under Nate Phipps, who's here. Hey, Nate, thank you. So I just wanted to pause here in case you wanted to sort of scan the QR code, join to our listserv, and learn more about other events as they come up. See people still QR coding it. It's not working? Oh.
If you go on our website,
did it work? Oh, yeah.
Right there, yeah. Or if you registered, I'll just.
So now I get the great pleasure of introducing our guests and colleagues here today, Dr. Kishonna L and Dr. Matthew Solomon. So Dr. Kishonna L. is a professor of racial justice and technology at the University of Michigan School of Information and director of the Intersectional Tech Lab, a Mellon-funded initiative. Her scholarship is intersectionally grounded in transdisciplinary theories and methods of feminism, digital studies, platform studies, game studies, criminology, sociology, and critical race scholarship. She interrogates the impact that technology has on culture and how minoritized users in particular influence the creation of technological products and the dissemination of digital artifacts. Her incredible work is based on analyses of gameplay, platform design, and digital infrastructures. Dr. Gray authored Intersectional Tech, Black Users in Digital Gaming, and Race, Gender, and Deviance in Xbox Live. She also co-edited Feminism in Play and Woke Gaming. She's been featured in notable media outlets, including Wired and the New York Times, and has been recognized with numerous awards, most recently the 2023 Black in Gaming Educator of the Year Award. Dr. Matthew Solomon has been a professor specializing in film history and theory at the University of Michigan since 2011. His interests include early cinema, classic Hollywood, and French film, often exploring cinema's connection to material culture and the arts. He leverages new technologies in his teaching, of which we'll hear a little bit about today. And Dr. Solomon's publications include Disappearing Tricks, a monograph on Chaplin's The Gold Rush, and Méliès's Boots. He also edited works such as Fantastic Voyages of the Cinematic Imagination and Magnificent Méliès. He's co-edited 2 book series focusing on cinema cultures and archival research. So these are guiding questions that we hope the presentations that Dr. Gray and Dr. Solomon help animate for us. We'll return to these after Dr. Gray and Dr. Solomon sort of present aspects of their work, but please and join me in welcoming our colleagues and guests today.
Are you keeping time? Because y'all, they gave us 12 minutes. I'm like, my goodness, what am I supposed to do in 12 minutes?
Do you want us to keep time?
You might need to keep time. I'm not gonna lie. Just stop me when it's time to stop. Okay, all right, perfect. I want to make sure to save space and have enough time for everybody. I won't take up all the time. So I'm really glad to be here. I was really excited, about this concept of curiosity, and I'm glad to see us take up that kind of conversation, to think about curiosity and to think about imagination. I think one of my favorite quotes from Bell Hooks kind of is central to kind of what guides me in my work. And so that quote is, we've not just been colonizing our minds, we've been colonizing our imaginations. And so I spend a lot of time with youth, a lot of us do, I think youth are the ones that keep us curious and keep our imaginations and the intellectual curiosity. So I really enjoy spending time in youth cultures. And so I do a lot of research in gaming. So I think the core of me explores what are young folks learning about themselves from games. And so, of course, kind of naturally, I focused a lot on Black youth, especially with the problematic representations that's been in gaming. So I kind of just give you a little bit of an overview. So I don't usually keep, I'm not really a Black game studies per se. I know that you shared a lot of disciplines and fields that I'm a part of. That's because I get kicked out of all of them because I don't act right. I don't do right. I'm gonna just do my own thing, so they kick me out, but it's okay. It's all right, go off. But really, I think a lot of those fields have been informing the book project that I'm working on. I'll kind of give you some of the basis of what that looks like right now. So I'm working on a project called Black Game Studies. And the concept of play is very serious, for Black folks. I know how I'm outlining the chapters of the book. It's those kind of colloquialisms. I don't know, euphemisms. I don't know what the sayings or idioms or dichos or whatever you would say. I don't play no games, or play with your mama, don't play with me. So those are gonna outline the chapters, and I'm very excited about it. But actually, one of the things that also I'm curious about here too is AI. Now, I don't care about AI, I'm gonna be honest, I only care about AI just as far as I can throw it, but really because young folks are really interested in it. But what got me interested in AI was actually a personal experience of mine. So we're gonna start with that quote. I was playing around with Midjourney. There was a few, maybe a year ago now, last summer, I'll forgive the if you're looking at that screen, I know that font is not great to see, so apologies for that. But I was tagged in a series of posts on Twitter back when, I don't know if Twitter was ever cool, but in the cool days of Twitter. And so folks were, they were sharing, it was when the metaverse was all the rage, everybody was talking about the metaverse, and I didn't really care about the metaverse then either, because in my mind, the gaming has been the metaverse, so a lot of people can always, take a few notes like from gaming. But I was really interested because there was this event that was happening. It was talking about some things that were pretty interesting to me, but what made me more curious was that there was a Black woman and I didn't know who she was. And so I reached out to them. I was like, oh, you tagged me in this. I'd like to be a part. I want to show up to this workshop. Like, who is she? And they said, oh, Kishonna, well, that's you, actually. So a few things. First, I was flattered. I was like, oh, okay, that's cute. Thank you. How did you get this picture of me when that's actually my face? And then that's when they sent me, this kind of long overview of, I played with Midjourney to create your image, and we learned about you through ChatGPT. And so I was like, okay, y'all taking a little bit of liberties here, right? So let me speed up because I want to make sure to get into it. I know I've only got 12 minutes. But what I thought was very interesting, because at first I was flattered, but then I got a bit concerned about then what does that mean if somebody in a room, so some of you, half of you, most of you don't know me. So if you were to Google me and then the picture of the AI entity popped up, you wouldn't be able to decipher what's real and what's not. So I'm very concerned about issues of like erasure, right? But I'm also, thinking about like this concept of like play, and back to that old saying, play with your mama, don't play with me. They're playing with Blackness in very interesting ways that I think, a lot of scholars are starting to interrogate. And I think we got to really think deeply about what that means. Now, so whenever I started to interrogate it, it actually took me back to do some rereadings of a lot of things that I read in grad school. I didn't really get and understand in grad school, I'll be honest. We read it and I'm like, I don't really get it. But a lot, like now, I'm understanding the connections. And so I've been going back. I'm very curious about, a lot of W.B. Du Bois's sci-fi essays and chapters. Very, very interested. It's saying a lot. And there's a lot that's helping me make sense of like the gaming space as well. So the three in particular, the Negro Church, that's the sociology of religion piece. A lot of people look at that as like, the critique of like the church and a critique of like religion, especially its presence, extensive presence like in Black lives in particular. But there's also a lot that he's saying about leisure and amusement in that. And I make those connections to play and really, so he's saying some really interesting things. Also Princess Steel, that's that time travel piece that he had where he's basically doing like this social construction of technology, talking about like the incorporation of like steel in our cities and saying, hey, what is this doing to our landscape? But there's also the conversations around colonization, around like taking materials from their homelands and bringing them to places that are unnatural and doing, bastardizing them. So history of like, taking Black folks from Africa. So there's a lot of conversations there. And then also the comet. This piece he wrote that was published in 1920. So this was the piece where, an apocalypse has happened. And then, a comet kind of like destroyed or decimates New York City. And then there is like some folks who survive. So it's a Black man that survives, and he finds a white woman that survives. They come and they bring they make a life together. But then ultimately other survivors are around, and then they advocate for the lynching, for this racialized death and violence of the Black man who is cohabitating and living this life with this white woman. And so what was very interesting, especially with the comet, is that it's really helping me make sense of the apocalyptic genre, like in games, like to understand the themes that are present inside there. So I have this quote that's going to be in the book somewhere. So video games, while a site of leisure and recreation, sometimes offer a peek into the human condition to make sense of present realities and futuristic desires, or correcting past mistakes of the troublesome property in particular, especially with the anti-Blackness that's very present like in games. And so the takeaway, so here would be I'll talk a little bit about some games. We don't have much time for that, but the takeaway, especially from, this kind of analysis that I'm doing of these games, is that if we whiteness can't exist, then you, the other, can't either. And in fact, we'll probably kill you first. So The Last of Us is a game that really had some problematic kind of connotations. Let me see if I can just easily shift over there. But The Last of Us is one of those video games that I couldn't play for too long. I know I can't play that much of this. But what was interesting about The Last of Us, so there's gonna be violence here. It's racialized violence. It's video game violence, but it's still kind of disruptive to the core. So The Last of Us, apocalyptic genre, zombie virus has taken over the land. We've all died. this white woman here, Ellie, the one that has the gun, she is actually immune from this disease that has decimated the population. And so Nora is a part of a resistance group called the Fireflies. And so she said, well, Ellie, you could actually save us all if you would sacrifice yourself. So, kinds of like that. It goes into like themes of like justice, greater good, utilitarianism, kind of all that. So really interesting themes in there. So, but Ellie is like, hell no, y'all not killing me. I don't care. I'm going to kill all y'all first, right? So this is essentially what she does. She goes through and kills everybody. Now, what's interesting about this death in particular is that in this game, we analyzed, like the deaths, and the death of Black women, but Black folks in particular, are pretty violent and significant, and they do something extra. They actually put the user into this space. Let me fast forward here. They make the user complicit in her death. So here in this space, it's waiting for us to press a button. It's waiting for us to press square. It's waiting for us to press Y, depending on what console you're playing it at. So you see, square, and then we are here. We're just hacking and slicing and chopping up like this woman, right? Hold that. Put a pin in that one. I'm gonna go to another example here. There's another game, because I don't want to see that level of violence. I don't want to subject y'all to that either. It's pretty intense. There's another game, Battlefield 1. Let me go ahead and it's a really beautiful opening. Let me just play for a second. Military violence. We'll see. Somebody. What I loved about this game was that it was the first time that I know of, that they incorporated Black military regiment. So these are the Harlem Hellfighters that we're actually following. So the Harlem Hellfighters, were the Black and brown folks out of the New York area mostly. They fought a lot in France, had a lot of success, if you could call it success. That. But I was very interested in what that would look like in a video game, because everything don't need to be gamified, okay? But so I'm like, all right, well, let's see what y'all gonna do. All right, so when they brought this in, I thought it was a very beautiful opening, a very beautiful visual, but they did something interesting, and so I wish I could just build this up for you, but I'm gonna have to just jump right to it. What they did is created this memoriam of sorts. So whenever you died on the field, they gave a name, and they gave a year of birth and a year of death. Now, so this in-game memoriam was really interesting, especially for those of us who play video games, because we don't want to humanize the experience, right? We just want to play, we want to just kill, do all that stuff. And so by providing this in-game memoriam, it actually kind of made us take a few seats, to kind of sit with this of oh, what does this actually mean? What does this level of military violence mean? And how we're just kind of casually playing it. So I appreciated in the lab, the students, researchers or whatever, they were kind of engaging in that way. And so this happened over a series of a couple times, that the game would just make us pause and sit with this, right? Now, what's very concerning for me is that, here, let me show you, let me see if I can find another one. Yeah, so here's another, Rudolph Johnson, 1886, 1918. So you have to think about the context in which this game exists and created. It's 2016, 2017. And so after each death, there was a Black man in the classroom, and he made the comment, and he said, "Damn, #Rudolph." And I was like, what? What'd you say? I was like, whoa. Because it was important to understand that this game was released during the period of #Black Death Everywhere, #Mike Brown, #Ezell Ford, #Tamir Rice, #Sandra Bland, #. And the fact that this game was released, it was actually continuing, in how we analyze it, it was continuing the same patterns of this anti-Black death, of where we only get a few moments, the last moments of a person's life, and we bear witness to their death in really interesting and significant ways. And so that's another example. Let me get back to this. How am I for time? I'm terrible for time. I know I am. Okay. Oh my gosh. Okay. 2 minutes. Oh my gosh. Terrible. Okay. And so what's interesting is that we started to then ask our questions about, had conversations around like accessibility, like on campus, and we started thinking about then racial accessibility, like similar to like disability, like accessibility. We started to think about like, can we play that? Sure, we can play that, but what's going to be our experience inside those spaces? So there was like a moment where we thought about like, who are the audience? Like, so a game like this, like Black folks are not the audience for that, try to witness, that level of like Blackness. Now, remember, I started off like talking about AI, but AI actually gave me like a lot of language to then think about the anti-Blackness in the games, like from the examples that we had. So Shudu, she doesn't exist. She's not real. She's AI. A lot of us, we thought she was real for like a long time. But basically, she doesn't exist, but we have these recreations, these productions and constructions of like Blackness, but then we have this representation without embodiment, essentially, right? And so then it's important. So some of the work that I'm thinking about now, in addition to like the Black Game Studies piece, I'm developing what I'm calling like a synthetic literacy. So similar to the literacy that we have, like media literacy, digital literacy, like it's also important for us to then develop like this sort of like literacy like around AI. Because I know gone are the days where, AI has learned to create fingers. I remember the fingers used to be distorted and you could tell like, oh, that's AI. No, they're good now. It learned how to draw fingers. So then we have to think about the other kinds of things. And also not just thinking about how we decipher and identify, but also the larger context of what that means around this erasure. And I think, like the end of the story is basically we're engaging Blackness without engaging Black folks, right? Let me go here. Oh yeah, in there I'll talk a lot about carceral logics and Black death in gaming. Okay, there's tons of stuff. There's a precedent, there's a historical precedent where I think that, I use gaming is like the canary in the coal mine, where a lot of the conversations that we have publicly, like in mainstream, actually started like, more than like a decade ago, almost 2 decades ago, when we think about like gaming. So if you see like in 2010, people talked about like the Connect being racist, and then what subsequently then happened was that we had like this influx of all these, so if we think about like, the racist facial recognition technology, the inability of like, technology to see and decipher different kinds of people, it can't tell Jerome from Jamal, it can't tell Muhammad from Abdul, and then we're using these CCTV, these cameras are everywhere, and then it has a precedent that basically they never got it right, and they said, but gaming is usually like the testing ground. So yeah, I'm curious about those things as well. Okay, I'm gonna stop there. I appreciate y'all. Thank you.
That's a tough act to follow. Can you hear me okay? So I'm pleased to be here. Appreciate the invitation. It's an honor to sit with you in this space. Despite having been here all these years, I've never been here. Despite the fact that my mother was a career educator, secondary school teacher, I'm proud to be a second-generation educator. I'm going to give you some framework. This is the only time I'm going to ask you to read along with the slide. The context in which I'm trying to teach my students critical media literacy through film analysis, for them to really understand that where you put the camera, how long your shot is, what the camera angle, what the editing, what order you put things in, that makes a really big difference in the meanings that are created. One goal. Second goal is how do we use new technologies like virtual reality, streaming video. I'm big in audiovisual essays. I've replaced all my written assignments with audiovisual essays in just about all my classes. Developing a streaming video glossary where students can learn the key terms, not by reading a book, but by watching 3-minute videos. But one of the lessons that we have a particular challenge with in FTVM is for students to understand that the 2 parts of our curriculum, critical studies, film history, theory, analysis, is deeply related to actually making movies and picking up a camera and pointing it at something. So one of the hopes of this project, this initiative, is to help students really understand, integrate those 2 sides of the curriculum better. And I want to empower students to intervene in the canon rather than seeing old black and white movies as having nothing to say to them, nothing to relate to them. I want to give them an opportunity. We know how Orson Welles did it. How would you do it? And to put them in the driver's seat And that's exciting for me because it's a way of thinking more differently about what came before and what will come in the future. So every field has its canonical works, and this is one that looms pretty large in film studies. Citizen Kane, if you look at syllabi across the country, you'll see this comes up. Many of you probably saw it in the context of a course. Rather than pushing back on that, my goal is let's lean into it. Let's figure out what we can do differently with the canon. So, spoiler alert, getting, once we've seen the film once, what can we do? When I arrived here at Michigan, after 9 years at underfunded, under-resourced City University of New York, I found that one of the wonders, and curiosity and wonder is like centering it in my pedagogy in my life, so I'm really pleased with that thematic, was that we have the papers of Orson Welles here at U of M. And guess what? I can teach those, I can explore those, I can write about those, I can set my students loose in the archive. And this is a story about collaboration. This is not about me. This is about the collaborations that I've been able to forge. And one of my best and most valued collaborators, Phil Hallman, who is the curator of that collection, who is a full-time librarian, but also deeply invested in getting students in this collection and thinking creatively about, we have these great collections, what can we do with them to push them forward? So you're gonna hear a lot of shout outs to my collaborators. I'm gonna try and stay within the 12-minute mark. Feel free to cut me off. As I said, first 9 years in New York, I'm used to being interrupted. So one of the things that we find in the archive is plenty of documents, paper documents galore. Not a lot of film materials, but a lot of documents. So, students this term are digging into those archives. They're figuring out what can I learn from early script versions, from set design records, from you name it that exists in the archive. What can I learn from that? And this is another of my collaborators, former PhD student, now assistant professor, tenure track, Western Michigan University. Vincent Longo was an undergrad here and a PhD student here, and he kind of caught the archive bug. He caught archive fever, and he's never come back up for air. But he's also a filmmaker, and he studied filmmaking, so he had a different point of view on what we could do with these materials, and that was contagious. I'm obsessed with this film, every shot in it, and this is one of the bits that has obsessed me. I won't subject you to the whole thing. Charles Foster Kane, his second wife, his one marriage has gone under, second marriage is now also failed, has a childish temper tantrum where he destroys the room that used to be occupied by his second wife. Again, I won't show you the whole clip, but the idea was, can I get inside that? As a viewer, I've been frustrated all these years. I actually want to get inside the movie. I don't want to just sit here on the outside. Can I get inside this movie? And this scene was one that obsessed me, and took a meeting with Stephanie O'Malley, another of my great collaborators at the Duderstadt Center, and said, hey, do you think we could create this scene in VR? And much to my surprise, she said, sure. And that was, again, there are people on this campus that like to say no. We know them. There are other people on this campus that are pleased to say yes. So let's find those people. Let's start working together. And together with the Emerging Technologies group, they said, this is on mission. We want to work with this. We want to use this technology, put it in the classroom, empower students, engage pedagogy. And we have these great set design photographs, continuity photographs. So you can see what you don't notice about that scene is it's pretty much one space. It's enclosed space. It's a real three-dimensional space. Turn these photographs over the 3D modeling team, and guess what? They can create a pretty photorealistic model of this space. So now we're inside Susan Alexander's room. We're thinking differently about her character. We're thinking different about the movie. Dari, another of our great collaborators, comes on, does a lot of the programming, because we're still missing a key part, right? It's an empty room. It's fun to explore it. We can learn a lot about set design, but how do we put an avatar in there? What can we do with this space? This is kind of a 3D walkthrough of the space itself. Again, as an instructor, there's plenty I can teach students about what we learn about the character from this setting, but wouldn't it be great to have an actual avatar in there? The problem is we can't get that data from the film itself. So we have to, with the support of some generous funding from LSA Technology Services, and Moni Dressler, another big supporter of this project, visionary, I think that is the right word, for Moni and their team, Sean Jackson, other collaborators in LSA Technology Services, where we will be on Friday, 10 to 1. If you want to see this tool in action, come on up to MLB 2001A. We'll be in there Friday morning, 10 to 1, working with this. We brought in a motion capture actor who had done work in Hollywood, and we had him reenact the scene in the studio here at U of M to get the motion capture data. Of course, I can't possibly do that. Luckily, Vincent Longo is a filmmaker. He did. He directed that whole motion capture shoot. And as a consequence, we were able to create an immersive 3D environment. An idea that I didn't have is, they said, well, why don't we put a camera in there? I was like, why don't we? Great idea. Better than just standing in the room. Let's think about putting a camera in. And not only did they put a camera in, this camera actually records. So you aim it at whatever is in the virtual space, you press record, and it records it. So last, my goal of trying to get students to think, okay, how would it be different if I did it differently? If I put the camera, now I can finally do that because we could compare side to side. What difference does it make when the camera's down low? What difference does it make up here? And literally there are infinite versions. No two versions of these will ever be the same. Every student will create their own version, and we'll learn together about what these differences, what difference it makes. Plus you're engaging with VR, which is kind of inherently novel to many people other than Kishonna, who, it's old news to her. But we can, be in that space and empower students to, again, we know how Orson Welles did it. We break down the scene, we know exactly how he did it. How would you do it? And this is Citizen Kane VR, which lives in the Duderstadt Center and is open to anybody who wants to go to their visualization studio and check it out. And you can experience this with a VR headset, or you can experience the desktop version, which is more accessible for some users. And once you're kind of, I think you already saw enough of this. This, of course, had been on the books in my department for a long time. Said, I can use that, I can use that. Nobody had been teaching it, and so that became the way in which, okay, we're gonna spend the first half of this class learning Citizen Kane inside and out. Second half of the class, I'm gonna put this technology in your hands, and you're gonna tell me how you would do it and what things you would do different. You've looked in the archive, you studied, now go out there and do something different in the second half of the course. And we thought, well, why is it that Susan Alexander doesn't even get to trash her own room? That's not right. So we were able to model her character, and now students can choose. You want to, again, think hypothetically about what this scene could look like, not what it was, but what it could be. And the other thing that we've been researching in the first half of this course is, where do we see people of color in Citizen Kane? They're there. Often hard to catch, but they're there, and we can identify some of them, not all of them. What do we know about their careers? How do we bring them to the forefront? Louise Franklin, amazing singer, performer. She only gets one line in this movie. And again, as we did in previous iterations of the course, we could find out, when she was on set, when she was working. We could try and tell her story, a traditional humanities method. But the VR folk, and Alton Red, who gets a close-up and he sings in a Miz, sings this soulful jazz. moment, like he only gets a moment in the film. Could we do something different? And so the latest build of this software allows students to substitute in these two other avatars, to think about a completely hypothetical Black Citizen Kane in which this looks different, this feels different. And so this is the second time we'll be trying it out with this new set of avatars with students. It did win us the Innovative Pedagogy Award from our professional organization, this and the Audiovisual Lexicon, which I can tell you all about on another day.
About a minute left.
What?
About a minute.
1 minute, okay, great. So you know this scene, it's the famous scene. Turns out, well, you have these great VR models, well, why not put them in the virtual studio and let the students act out their own version? That's precisely what we did 1 year ago. We reenacted the cabin scene in the virtual studio, and the students came up with their own version, which they named Little Charlie's Sled. We stuck to the dialogue, we stuck to the blocking, but we literally put our class in the shoes of the filmmakers. We understood what it took to get that shot. They got to put their own spin on it, and they got immersed in virtual production in a course that maybe they enrolled in because they thought they'd be sitting there in a lecture classroom taking notes and answering multiple choice tests, but they got something a little different from that experience. I'm excited about where this has gone. We did another scene thanks to the Hassan Berry, one of our many great transfer students. Europe has been a great pipeline for this project, who modeled the Great Hall space in VR, and as a result, we were able to enact a completely different scene based on this amazing 3D VR model that he had created. So for me, it's all about how do I collaborate with not only my colleagues, but with my students, make them collaborators, go on this journey together. I hope there's curiosity when they come in. I find wonder at the end of it. So that's all I got for you.
Odd to stand at the podium for this part, but I'll do that in the interim. So our goal for the next 40 minutes that we have before we'll wrap up is that we just want to continue to have dialogue with this group. I want to say to Dr. Solomon and Dr. Gray that if we also would like for you to feel that you have a sense of permission in asking each other questions, because I know I'm just so excited. I think when both of you spoke about your work and to some extent the trajectory of your work, you get that twinkle. You have like a twinkle in your eye when you talk about it. And I think that that's where the curiosity and the wonder become embodied. And I think that for me as a listener and as a learner, it's just electric. So I had all these questions, all these thoughts that came up. And I think that is just really a testament to how curiosity can be a driver and also a means of pulling us together and inspiring us to think beyond what the confines of our imagination, or see beyond what we think is possible, see beyond the present. And so I hope you all will, also share that sentiment. So I think maybe what we can do, John, is this okay, is just maybe open it up to, I won't stand up here, but I'll get one of the mics so that between John and myself, we can help to field questions. Yeah. You just have to push that. And wait, okay. Is this working? Oh, yeah, I can hear myself loud and clear. And so maybe what we might start by doing before we open it up to the group is just, Dr. Solomon or Dr. Griff, you had any initial thoughts or reflections just in hearing from one another, and then we'll kind of use that as also a springboard to open up the conversation for the group.
Mm-hmm.
We're going to be spending time together. We finally met. Now we're going to
Absolutely. We're just about. That's right. one of the things that I'm really excited about, because I think so too much in the spaces that I'm in, we spend our time reacting to what exists. And I absolutely love, towards the end of my presentation, somebody asked me like, well, if everything's all bad, why are you there? And I'm like, well, no, it's not all bad. There's some great stuff here, But I think the AAA studios, like the big studios that make these big productions, they kind of give us these limited visions of Black life in particular. And that's often what we see. But like, I'm thinking about the VR example I didn't get a chance to show. It's called the I Am a Man VR experience. Derek Ham, he's at NC State, and he created a VR experience of re-engaging students, like with the moment that Dr. King was in Memphis, like the reason he was there. And I think a lot of that's been like lost, like we forget that part. So, he was there for the poor people's strike, the sanitation workers like went on strike, just as a reminder, like for folks. And so this VR experience places us there, and it not only places us like there in that context, it's like this precursor to the revolution, to the uprising that then came after Dr. King then was killed. And so it kind of shows the pathway to being active and to mobilize and to organizing like with community. And it shows that hesitations of like why people might not. So it really kind of humanizes even like an activist, kind of like reality of like where people just see like the end result, but it kind of shows like the complexities that are involved in that. But the VR experience, kind of gave us like that experience. Now, I won't say that's going to change the world. Oh, racism's going to end because of VR. No, it's not it. It's a tool that just kind of like allows us to kind of like engage at like a different kind of level. So that's what I really love about VR very much. So, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think I have a lot of questions that are like very specific, so that they probably ought to wait until we have coffee. But yeah, I'm happy to answer any questions or engage.
I want to hear from y'all, absolutely. Especially how these things like show up in y'all's work and stuff.
I think our group is small enough where we can attempt to just jump in and then, I'll facilitate as needed.
We can keep talking too. Who are the gamers in the room? Who's play video games? Who's gamers? Be proud, raise your hands high. What are you doing? Raise them high. Who's done VR experiences before? Okay, gotcha. I think one of the things too that a lot of people are, it's intense to be in a VR experience. So could you speak a little bit into what it means to then to be in like a VR experience? I'm not sure if some of you all like watch like the YouTube videos of like people like failing, they're falling and running into things. It's kind of like a disorienting kind of like experience. And I just think that even the putting on of like a headset, there's a lot to be said about like people like even interact with that technology. Can you speak a little bit then too like that? I would love that.
Yeah, so what I've observed is that people kind of get a certain amount of fatigue at a certain point. Mm-hmm. But I think that initial experience, even if it's 30 minutes of like exploring the space, allows them to think differently about the assignment. So I think it's really valuable for somebody to put the headset on, do the experience. I mean, I have problems with VR because, I can't really use both hand controllers. And so usually I'm in VR for a little bit, but I want to come out and use the desktop version. So that's been a real boon because students with or without disabilities, at some point they want to come out of VR, but they still want to engage with the tool. They want to engage with the camera. They want to think actively about what they're going to do. But I do think there's a different kind of learning that happens when you can like put a position over in the corner and look at things from that angle, or you could be and see. I just think that creates a different kind of learning, something about putting on the headset, getting in that space. That's why I'm convinced that VR is a tool that educators need to lean into. What's great is that our students can help us. Mm-hmm. We had a student last year who created a whole VR model of an early film studio. And as a result, I can now take my film history students into that studio to look around, to understand, okay, you can read about an early film studio, but to be inside it, to realize how small it was, how it relied on sunlight, there's a different kind of learning. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So I've drank the Kool-Aid on VR. I think it's absolutely the future, not only in terms of gaming and entertainment, but for learning, right? To have a different experience where you're immersed in the past. I think you just have a different, That's my belief, my hope, that's my experience. Some students don't like it, right? There's a percentage that are like, I've had enough.
Yeah.
This is not for me. But I would say that's a relatively small percentage. That's been my experience. I'm curious, if that in any way relates to your.
Absolutely. Do you have your hand? Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I've got a couple questions, but I'm going to start with one that's about learning.
Mm-hmm.
Do you find that simple play is enough, or do you need to add something to have a student or the people you observe in your work take something that you hope they take away from the experience? If you do that, how do you stop ruining?
So I'm big. So in my service time, I guess if you will, I do like camps and like after school kind of programs like for young folks. And I'm a huge advocate of protecting play just for play's sake. So I'm not one that drunk the Kool-Aid of like, oh, they need to learn coding, they need to learn STEM, they need to learn something here. Because I also value traditional classroom instruction. I want to make sure that, the teachers are important and them in the classroom is important. What they do is also important. So I really see, like I love technologies like in the classroom, but research tells us a whole lot that, why there's some issues of like why there's not just full integration of the tech. There's a lot happening, right? And so I'm also big about just kind of having this like space of like just play. An aspect of my research, do you all know the Kidtropolis spaces? So you all know exactly what they are. The Kidtropolis spaces are the spaces like where you take your kids and they go in and they put like a costume on. They put like, they're like a doctor or a construction worker. So it's like play, but they put on worker outfits. I am wholeheartedly against activating children for work. And I think that's also why, like, I'm hesitant of like, oh, they can learn coding. Sure, they can learn coding. They can learn languages. Like, sure, they can learn languages. But also just what are they curious about and what are they bringing out in these spaces? So I don't put too much on, like inside that space. And I'm able to do that because, like I said, I'm not teaching them math. I'm not teaching them science. So I am allowed, I feel like I have the freedom to just let them just play and then see what comes like from that play space. But I think that there's a lot of that confidence building too that I think is really necessary, especially for today's learner, especially the kids who have gone through like quarantine. They were in COVID, there's a lot. And even in like our own classroom, when you talk about, like a lot of the so-called deficiencies or developmental delays that like some of our students like might even have. And so then we have to just go to where they are. And some of that play space is like the space that can reactivate the imagination, the creativity. And I would really advocate for a lot of us to kind of just allow folks to just be and then think about what's there and just go to like where they are, like inside that space. But I'm big about like, and it would also mess me up though, because then I didn't get the big grants. Because if I did incorporate, it's coding and all that STEM stuff, I could have got some bigger grants than I did, and I didn't, because I was like, I don't want to turn the kids like into workers, like in that way. I'm like, it's all right, it's fine, I don't need the money. Lying, I was mad I didn't get the money. Yes, go ahead.
You mentioned these barriers.
Yeah. Right.
I fully know the story on play.
Yeah. Absolutely.
But the problem is they go into systems that
That's right.
don't have any concept. And I'm just curious, you mentioned all of this research
Yes,
and data about what those mindsets are
Yeah.
out, and I'd love to hear more about
Yeah.
what that, how you see
Absolutely. So again, I didn't come from education, so I have done like a lot of onboarding of understanding the classroom in particular. So in the spaces that I was in, I've been in Appalachia a whole lot. So it's just not a lot of resources. A lot of folks are under-resourced, and then the teachers are, the part-time teachers, the part-time social workers, the part-time, they're part-time, they cook, they do so much, like for kids, right? And also, I spent a lot of time like in Phoenix, so that's like an urban center where, mostly Latinx folks, indigenous like folks, and so there are different other kinds of concerns, and then what that means like on the reservation and stuff. And so I think like for me, I'm big about like, okay, we can have all this fancy technology in the classroom, but if these kids are hungry, like what are we doing? You know what I'm saying? So I'm thinking about like there are so many like basic needs that aren't met, for like a lot of children. And I'm like, we can have all this beautiful curriculum building and pedagogy, but if they go home and they ain't got no lights, then I'm just like, what are we doing? So I try to recognize that and like acknowledge that. So I even remember having, for the camps and the after school things that I had, I was intentional about putting aside budgets and funding just to provide dinner for them so they could have like something to eat. And then the dinner conversation, especially for the funding bodies, was like really interesting because they're like, no, we don't pay for food. I'm like, what you mean you don't pay for food? Like, no, we can do all this other stuff. So I think I didn't anticipate having these basic conversations around like basic needs and basic human rights, you know, where I'm trying to come into a space and just kind of do this, all this wow, amazing stuff with these VR technologies. Because sometimes we just had to kind of just sit down with it, right? Also related to like VR, I remember having a project in that space. I wanted to get parents activated to what their kids were doing. I think activating, like having this intergenerational kind of like exchange is like really important. Because I know a lot of times like parents are like, well, I don't know what the kids are doing. And I was like, well, let's just go in there and play with them. So we used to host sessions for parents to just play Fortnite. We taught parents how, Granny had a gaming with Granny session. And then they were empowered to then give their young folks a little more space. And then we activated the young folks also to teach them how to have the conversation like with their parents. Like they were like, I don't know why she makes me turn it off. I'm in the middle of a game. I'm like, well, you explain it to her, you know? So actually the gaming space had offered different kinds of like possibilities that we didn't really anticipate. So I think just having that like kind of demystifying and dismantling like assumptions about like gaming and all these technologies was actually so much more powerful than them learning to like program in Python. I really feel that. You know. I think your hand was up next, I think.
I was just going to ask it. I think it applies for both, but in your context, Dr. Gray, when you're among students and youth and you're seeing them play, I'm curious the kinds of commentary you see that they have and how, to what degree it kind of matches some of the interpretations you're making, or if they're like super just in it and not necessarily stepping aside from it and having comments in the same or similar for you, Dr. Solomon. And what kind of learning are you noticing among the students in these constructed with others?
Yeah, I mean, I think for me, it's about empowerment. You know, that's, I think, the biggest takeaway that I've had from these kinds of assignments is empowerment. Because I love play, and I think it should be at the center of what we do in the classroom. There should be a lot of fun going on, but there's also results, and you do have to show there's an assignment, and you know your task is to do it. I hope you have fun with it, and I hope you come in on your spare time to have more fun and more play with it. But I think that's been the biggest moment of excitement, of where students, their eyes just kind of get big, and when they walk in that video studio and they see that they're like in this space that they saw on the screen, and that, you know, these possibilities are open to them at U of M, not very many other places. That to me has been the biggest part. Is for me at the beginning, all I did was just take my students to Dieterstadt Center. I just wanted them to have a couple hours in that building, get a tour. Because I have students who say every semester, I graduated, how did I never make it into this building? How did I never set foot in this building? So I don't know. I don't know how that's the case, because I'm telling all my classes about it. So that to me is the empowerment, envisioning other possibilities, because I think, you know, our students do really well. They're really motivated, and they know exactly what it takes to get a traditional A in a traditional class, and to open up other possibilities and say, like, this isn't really about that. We're trying to do something different here. I think that, to me, is a aha moment where they can see a different future and they can see different possibilities. And to me, when I walk in the Dieterstadt Center, it's like walking to the future. And I'm like so excited to be there. The collaborative energy, like putting them in different spaces where class is not just about me standing up here, because I'm not going to be standing, sorry, and talking at you. This is about, we're going to be working together. We're going to put our hands on stuff. I bring in a jigsaw puzzle. We're going to work on that because that goes on in the film. What can we learn from that? So that to me is just about, is there a different way we could learn that maybe I wasn't necessarily taught in that framework? Maybe you weren't, but can we do something differently? Because I'm kind of bored with doing the same old, and just kind of bored. And I think COVID taught us a lot of what we're doing isn't working. We could do better. So that's the kind of spaces that I'm as, like, just seeing their faces, even the ones that are like so disaffected when I'm talking about Citizen Kane, they don't want to hear it. What is this boring lecture? What is this boring discussion? But then they walk or they put on the headset and I see a totally different student emerge in the second half of the class. I'm like, where were you? Well, okay, you emerged when we moved into these different spaces and you could loosen up and feel like you weren't tied to this chair. You could walk around. So that's what I've seen is just like that kind of, especially coming out of the Zoom period, you know, like that's what I've seen. Yeah.
I want to figure out a way to translate that to like a traditional classroom. Because I think even talking, you know, even back to like the question that you had asked, I know so many teachers, you know, wonder like how, like I want to incorporate it, but because they're so burdened with so many other things, like they don't have the space like to do it. And so I guess that's where I just see then like the value of, you know, folks like us going and supplementing and supporting, you know, like our teachers and our educators to then do that. So in my mind, I want to take some students into that space because I haven't been in it. So thank you also for you know, telling us even like about the space because there's so much stuff here, you know, especially at a very resourced institution. I think sometimes we might take it for granted, you know, and I think it's important to then take that step back to say, hey, you know, this is actually cool stuff. Let's use it. Especially the archives, especially, you know, the spaces that might transform it to be like a media center or something, you know, so they'll do that real quick, you know, so yeah, I'll do it real quick. Thank you. Your hand was up next.
My question is about embodiment.
Both of you have talked about how technology provides the opportunity to be embodied and disembodied in ways that affect how we think about ourselves, how we think about others, how we navigate context. And so at the intersection of that, I'm thinking about what are the affordances and the challenges of technology to think about the ways that we can inhabit our own and maybe other people's bodies and experiences in new ways that open up new possibilities for the future without also, you know, recognizing that we have the opposite. And I think, Dr. Gray, you showed us how that's happening, how we can erase people from those spaces as well. So I think there are these affordances and constraints and embodiment. And I'd love to hear more about how you think about using those tools to help us think about how that supports a different kind of human learning in the future.
So yeah, I've been using this phrase embodied learning so far relatively unsuccessfully in grant applications. So maybe I probably haven't read the literature in education, and please send me some articles so I can become more well-informed. But just in anecdotally, experientially, I feel like there's something different that happens when a student like is in the space. Like again, I saw it when the students were on these rolling chairs in VR, trying to like push each other around the space, like a different kind of collaboration, a different kind of, there's something about like, and it's the play aspect, right? It's like, you don't have to sit in your chair for this bit. You can get up and move about. You can form little groups. You can team up. And so I'm convinced there's something that goes on with embodiment. You know, I have a particular relationship to now as a person with a progressive disability. Like I'm, you know, I have a contentious relationship with embodiment, but I'm deeply invested in embodied learning and what I just think it activates different parts of our mind. If you can give me some of the educational studies literature to beef up my grant proposals, I will undoubtedly do better in future competitions. But I do think there's something that goes on. Again, like the day I brought in a jigsaw puzzle to my class, and I said, well, we see this in the film, and it's a puzzle that's very much like this. Let's work on this. And as we're discussing, let's see what we learn. Something different happened in that space. And I do think it's also like, you're also signaling that I've opened the door for play, right? This is not that librarian who's asking you to be quiet and sit in your seat, or like calling upon you to answer a very directed question. I think it's just opening the door to like, we're gonna have a different kind of experience in here. Maybe this is uncomfortable for you. You're gonna have to like, you know, engage in a different way. So yeah, I'm convinced there's something goes on with I'm not a gamer, but I wanted to capture some of the energy of gaming in this application. But yeah, I'm kind of convinced that there's something goes on in that embodiment, which is virtual in gaming, virtual in this tool.
Yeah. I struggle with this one. I appreciate your question very much. I think I struggle. The reason I struggle, I don't mean to be a tech pessimist at all. But I guess we've just seen so many examples of where technology was supposed to usher in this new way of thinking, a new way of doing, and where's that though? You know, I'm waiting on it, you know? I mean, especially, you know, my background is, I'm a first generation student, and, you know, I picked a major just so I could hurry up and get out, because I was ready to go back home. So I picked criminal justice, so my background is actually in criminal justice and criminology. And I remember learning, I went down like the history of like police technology, and at every iteration of like incorporating like a new technology into like policing and like justice work, there was always this background conversation of like, it's going to do better, you know, with police oversight, it's going to do better, you know, police brutality and all that stuff. So I did a deep dive, you know, down when, for instance, like, you know, like the dash cam was like incorporated, and they were like, you know, we can finally see what they're doing. There's going to be responsibility and accountability. No, there wasn't. And then the body cams, you know, same kind of conversation. And then there wasn't. And CCTV. And then at every iteration, we see this abuse of power, in fact, you know, a lack of oversight. And so I had to extend that same conversation to then the conversation around like kind of entertainment technologies, you know, different screen cultures, because I felt like the same kind of thing was happening. So in the moment, for instance, like with AI, you know, everybody was very excited about AI. And I remember whenever I was sharing the concern that a lot of folks were having about how, you know, this technology is not going to be able to replicate or duplicate Blackness. And somebody probably from my school, like a school that I'm in, like the School of Information, they said, we just feed it better data points. And I was like, what you mean by that? What does that mean, feed it better data points? And so basically they were just going to essentially just do body scans and enunciation scans and kind of, you know, download as many Black folks and Black points as possible. Black hair, Black speak, the walk, all that stuff. And then I was like, okay, I get what you're saying, but then I had to think back to, I remember in talking about like avatar creation, right when we had like the era of like avatars, you know, like early 2000s, you know, and I remember doing like a little bit of a study there, and there was Black folks that said, well, it's Black hue, it has a Black hue to it, but it's more like blackface because it's not capturing me. And in essence, it was basically like, you know, it was literally like kind of like blackface kinds of conversations. And I guess I see the same thing happening with like this expansion of, you know, all these digital technologies and the expansion of like AI into so many kind of conversations, where I see it as more of like blackface because it's not really capturing the essence of Blackness. Levi Strauss, one of the parts that I missed, Levi Strauss is the company that utilized, you all remember when I showed that picture of the fashion model, that beautiful dark-skinned woman who's an AI entity, but Levi Strauss, the fashion company, you know, they said, well, we have a problem with diversity, but we have these AI tools so we can have as many diverse models as possible. That's what they said, right? And I'm like, wait a minute, we got models that are just sitting right there. Why? What's the reason you don't want to use the actual folks that exist? So that's the concern that I have, is that it's going to, if it's better and better and better, then people are going to be like, oh, well, we can just download them from this database and we don't have to actually do the work, right? And that's actually one of the concerns that we're then seeing like inside the gaming space. So video games has had a problem with doing Black hair. So Black artists and Black designers, you know, those have been the people who have been able to get these jobs. So now we have an entire database. It's a beautiful database, but now you can do Black hair and you don't have to have Black folks like on your team. I guess I'm bothered by that. And what then it actually means, like this disembodiedness of like, you know, so friends, also like another example of, I remember being asked to be on a grant it was the era where they were giving out money like hotcakes for VR, and everybody was like, VR is gonna, usher in like all these changes. And I think I'm quoted in an article like in the Washington Post where I said, no, it's not going to change the world. It's actually just going to replicate the same harms that we've always seen. And the funding bodies, they say, okay, leave her alone. We don't want to talk to her, right? But I think that they don't want to talk to me no more. But I think that then the concern, because they really wanted to argue this point that it was going to like generate like empathy, and they used this Darfur's dying, this example of basically just genocide that was happening like in Africa. And they used this game as an example to say, oh, look, we all were sad because it happened. I'm like, okay, sure you were sad, but what did it change? Like, I think that these tools can raise awareness. I recognize that. They're educational tools to help us understand. But if we're changing the material conditions of folks, we have not yet seen some of those kinds of things. So I wish, again, I'm not a tech pessimist. I love these things. I want to use them. But I think that I want to make sure that we're equipped with like the knowledge of why they're here and who's missing and why are they missing from that. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Actually, you just touched on what my other question was, which was empathy.
Yeah.
So, I think both of your work seems to really be about trying to put people in in the director's position, bring different actors in. You just poured some cold water on the idea of empathy in VR. totally, right? I think if one might say, like, if among the challenges that America has at the moment, it's a serious empathy gap.
Yeah.
And a lot of people talk about VR as an empathy play space.
Yeah.
But is it? You already said what you thought a little bit, and I want to give you a chance to expand on that. Matthew, I wonder what you think from your position.
I think that idea is a little overrated. I'm not sure that empathy is really the takeaway that I'm particularly interested in, at least for me. I think we ought to be thinking about curiosity and wonder more so than empathy. Like, what would it look like to imagine a Black Charles Foster Kane? Like, what would that, to me, that's not, I guess it's partly about empathy, but I don't know. Like Kishonna, I really appreciate, like, I'm just not that interested in AI. It just doesn't really.
I was happily bring me back in.
I'm just not sure I'm that interested in this idea that AI is an empathy machine. Again, I think, I admire the work of Courtney Cogburn. I think there's like a lot to that. And I think that's been one of the takeaways from the 1,000 Cut Journey. I'm not sure it's the only takeaway. And I think there's other, I guess as an educator, I'm not sure how much I can use empathy or how much I can leverage it in my classroom. Again, we might have an epidemic of a lack of empathy, but I don't know. I'm just thinking about other words that might be as valuable to think about. And maybe just because every time somebody mentions AI, it seems to always come back to that particular conversation about empathy. And again, I also don't play video games. I don't see that as a particularly empathic space, but I could be wrong,
I think for me, I would want them to use another word. So I'm like, okay, empathy is one word. I'm like, ask the question a different way. Let me know what the end goal is. What is it that you're wanting to do? And then we can better develop, things around that to support what folks are actually wanting to do. But I think also folks use the word like empathy because I don't think that they know what else to say. So then I would ask them, like, what is it that we're trying to accomplish? So I was a part of a project that was going to use VR. It was like Baltimore Stories. Basically, after the death of Freddie Gray, then a lot of folks wanted to say, hey, we need to understand what it means to like be like a Black man in America. I'm like, okay, well, we've got tons of things. First off, just do the reading, So I think we're doing all these things because people just won't do the reading because we don't need another tool to just do the things that's already there, So I guess I want to kind of go deeper. I'm Like, it's not that you actually want empathy. You want an easy way to understand different experiences, the Black experience, the queer experience, the trans experience, the immigrant experience. You just want an easy way, and you want the tool to kind of just do it real quick in a hurry, give you about 5-10 minutes, oh, and I understand. And it just won't, because then if you don't have like that knowledge base to then download the information that you might be seeing on the screen or that experience that you have, then you still don't have a place for it because you haven't developed the capacities to receive the information. So I think a lot of folks they have to be developed to receive the information, and we haven't. The classroom is where it's going to happen at. There we go, back to the classroom. Hopefully does that make sense? Okay.
I mean, I like the word immersion better, right? Can I put you in a surround where we're intellectually immersed, where are sensorially immersed? And that to me is not really about impersonating or putting ourselves, but I don't want to put you in the same space. I want to put you in RKO studio in 1940 and empower you to think about like all that went on there and what you might do differently. So I think I would pivot from empathy to maybe immersion.
On the screen, it's the I Am a Man VR experience of where you can go to the moment of like I said, where it's the sanitation worker strike, and then some moment like where he's killed, and then there's also like then the uprisings that kind of happen like afterwards. So I think it's a really good historical tool that would supplement learning about like social movements, like those moments like in the 60s. I think it really is really useful to kind of put you in a time and place. But again, it's not the thing. It won't be the only thing that you interact with and consume. So it's just like like in the classroom, you do some reading, you have the immersive experience, love that, and then the practical application and what does it mean right now? What do social movements look like right now? And then I think it's like a 3-4 pronged approach, that we need to really get at the thing that people just don't want to do the work, like to do it. It takes work.
What is this called?
The I Am a Man VR. I Am a Man VR experience. It's really beautiful. And that's Bobby Kennedy right there kind of announcing, like the assassination of Dr. King. So, so it's really powerful, especially for like the folks who were like there. So in the intergenerational space, there were young folks who were learning it alongside like some of their grandparents who would remember seeing it and like had witnessed it. And it was a really powerful like kind of moment. But I think the power of the moment really came of where, like it was during the movement of like, the movement like for Black Lives, of where the older generations were making sense of how the younger folks were kind of like protesting and engaging. It was different than they were. So I think it really was like a really beautiful moment like in that, like for connections. So I think a lot of times where, we think about like empowerment and confidence building, I think some of the things that we set out to do, there are other impacts as well. And I think that was like a really beautiful space of bringing the families together, like inside here. Yeah.
I want to push back a little bit.
Sure.
I agree with you. But the part what I hear you saying, Kishonna, is listen to what people say and believe them.
Yeah.
You don't need to have an experience. Believe them.
Yeah.
But isn't the point of good storytelling to create believable narratives so that people can put themselves in spaces? Is that where the value of immersion / empathy might come in?
I think storytelling's overrated, but I'm a fan of early cinema, which didn't have that much interest in storytelling, just wanted to show you something interesting and eye-catching. So yeah, I mean, I think stories are great. Obviously, like the media that I dedicate my life to is very much about storytelling. I just think it's only one of many possibilities, and I don't think it should get pride of place. I think, I think there's something about that's why I think I could rip one scene out of a movie and leverage the heck out of it, even if you don't know the story that surrounds it. So but I'm also, like I said, I'm a devotee of early cinema. YouTube is early cinema all over again. So storytelling is it's great and it's got great utility, but what about, experience, attraction, wonder.
I feel like the direction of this conversation is making me think about time and patience, and almost like what I'm hearing from both of you in some ways, like even this idea of like slowing down time, bending time, like what it means to have a certain type of patience around how you continue to drive or nurture curiosity around an idea. So sitting with a particular scene or moment and trying to think about all of these different ways to think about how you might relate, what lens you have, what you might change, or this idea of like, there's some things that we can get maybe you can get a quick answer, but that's not the same as being immersed in a longer process and getting depth in terms of your understanding and thinking about things over time. And so that just made me think about thoughts that you might have about how you think about teaching around slowing, when you need to dwell around an idea, when you need to get some feedback and check off some box so that you can move forward, and when you need to have a vision of like something that you can't achieve in a semester, or you can't achieve in a year, but is a part of like a longer process of development. So just any thoughts that you have there.
I actually love that answer, then to go back to then, what you were saying, because I think the power of a story is that we sit with it and we take the time with it. I think that what a lot of folks then are asking for, I think, are quick fixes. So I think that's why then I'm just like a bit hesitant, to kind of go full on into like, this will save us and save the world. I've slowed down a whole lot in the classroom, right? I think the quarantine pandemic demanded it, but I think we needed it way before then the pandemic happened. So for instance, like even like in the classroom, I scaled back stuff like almost about half, we were concerned about like students reading. Reading's important. I know a lot of us are just like, oh, well, so they're not reading. I'm like, we're going to read in the classroom then. So I know we would like spend time, like, just like on Monday. I'm like, I know y'all didn't read over the weekend. So then we're just going to read. We're going to sit here in class and we're just going to do some old school reading, like we might do in second or third grade. There's a lot of beautiful pedagogy that really happens. And I think, just sitting with the reading, also just like kind of sitting then with each other, like has been like really powerful to really help the students kind of just redevelop that confidence of like, I can do this. Cause I think, it took so much from them, especially a lot of our students now, they were like in high school, like in the pandemic, and, so we had to like reteach them like a whole lot of stuff. And I think that, we haven't slowed things down enough like for that. But I also think that it's important for us to then, I'm even thinking about like the moment that we're in, with like, especially the post-election, I'm also thinking that there's gonna, a lot of people feel the impetus to kind of speed up. We gotta hurry and do this, hurry and, have protections for different populations, hurry and do this, hurry and do this. And I don't know, I feel like, one of the pieces that I then think is missing is like kind of sitting and convening, like with folks, because I spent a lot of time in Appalachia, it allowed me, and also I grew up in Kentucky, the town that I grew up in, there's an active Klan chapter that's there. So racial violence was always like a prominent feature like in my life. And I remember when the Klan marched down Martin Luther King Boulevard, Lord, it was a time. And then the church leaders were like, okay, you marched, will you come and sit with us, and kind of chat and talk. And at first I was very mad in that moment, because I was like, no, I don't want to sit. I'm a kid. It was high school. And I'm like, no, they don't see value and they don't see our humanity. And then really that sitting was like a really interesting moment for me to then develop the empathy, for understanding, especially for somebody whose thoughts and ideologies were diametrically opposed to my existence in the world and how I see the world. And then there was a lot of transformation, like from, the Klan members who weren't Klan members anymore. A lot of their recruitment efforts were like slowed, but it was mostly because of the response really of the Black community that showed them the grace, which they didn't have to. We didn't have to, it wasn't a requirement, and in fact, they didn't deserve that. I'll say all those things. But the fact that, grace was shown, and the fact that they have been so disruptive and there have been like a history of racial violence, like on our community by the descendants, the folks who came from those communities, and they were continuing it. And then we were like, well, we could have a moment where we want to change it. I think we all have to be like intentional of like wanting that. And then everybody doesn't have that perspective of like wanting to do something different and like wanting to change it. So I'm a huge advocate of the reparation of harms and rehabilitative kind of like process. And I think that's important that we bring those things like into the classroom as well. It's such a useful, restorative justice is a useful, kind of framework for a lot of things. I don't know how I got there. My spirit just moved me there. My bad. I'm so sorry.
Yeah, so I'm a believer in less is more. And so there are no former students in the room. They could possibly tell you how excruciating or how eye-opening it can be to watch a shot 25 times in a row. We're just going to keep watching it, and we're going to keep hearing what else people are seeing here, what they think.
Yeah.
I just think it takes a long time for thoughts to percolate. As a devoted fan of hip hop music, I love repetition, and I think repetition has a power.
That's right.
And so that's like one of my pedagogical go-tos is like, actually, we're just going to keep watching it until we have nothing further to say. And I mean, a lot of times that can go on for a good long time, and Allowed sort of gave me the permission to like, yeah, we're just going to do one film in this class, 14 weeks. We're not going to go outside of it much. We'll learn about things that are related. But I think there's a lot we can get out of just really, really looking super close. But I'm a big, when I read SZ by Roland Barthes, that was a book that really, created ideas for me. I love the idea of microhistory, what Carlo Ginzburg has done. So those are like, key things that inform my pedagogy, which could be accused of being a little nearsighted. But I think it's powerful, and I think it's also a way of, it has something to do with mindfulness, I think, right? As just to really pay attention to every detail of what you're experiencing and to really train your senses to pick up on every. I actually think a good film studies class is a lesson in mindfulness and awareness, as well as a lesson in media literacy. So that's my take on slow reading, I think is the way I've heard it described. But for me, it started with SZ by Roland Barthes.
And I think, so in similar ways, that's okay, go on and go. I know you want to go, you fine, go on and go. I appreciate you. But I do close readings of play. So we have like really these like deep play moments, like where it's like similar to kind of just reading deep into a text or reading, sitting like with the film. And so so when I played The Last of Us, like the first time in particular, I just played and I didn't think about the larger context. It was that sitting with, that patience, that deepness that allowed me to kind of think about like, wait a minute, these Black deaths are different. These deaths of these trans folks are different. The deaths of these queer folks are different in here. And there was like this extra layer and level of like violence that we then continued with like by sitting. The same thing like with the Battlefield 1, like the opening scene, like where the soldiers, with the Black soldiers. And so we were sitting, it was like, okay, I'm a warrior, cool. And there was like that multiple repetition of like play that then the student researcher that was like, damn, hashtag Rudolph, he started saying that like every time there was like a Black death. And then we made the larger connections between like what was happening because of like that repetition of like, well, we played that scene over and over and over again. So there's a lot of beautiful utility like inside, the repetition space. Yeah, I love that.
So I think on that note, we wanted to make sure that we ended with at least a couple of minutes so that people didn't have to rush out. But if we could just thank Dr. Solomon and Dr. Gray once more for having this conversation with us.
Thank you. Thank you.
And just on behalf of the center, we want to thank you all for spending your lunch with us. We look forward to seeing you at future events and continuing to think with us more about curiosity and learning. So